Welcome back to the Culture Base podcast. I'm your co-host Dustin P. With me, as always, is Blake Bear. What up, Blake?
Hey, hey.
We are hitting the grind early today. Blake is doing a thing this week where he's waking up at 4 a.m. every day,
Mm,
and it is my job to keep him accountable from several states over. Uh, so if one of us looks tired, you'll know why. But I think he's okay. He's got plenty of liquid courage,
oh,
and
yeah.
we're ready to bring you another podcast episode. Before we get started uh, on today's topic, just a couple of quick things at the top. I want to remind you of you can subscribe on all audio podcast platforms. We encourage you to rate and review us there. That really helps us get the word out. You can also follow us on YouTube as well. Subscribe, like, ring the bell, all those things. You'll be notified every time we post a video, or if we decide to go live sometime, you'll get a notice about that as well. On the socials, we are at the Culture Base on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, anywhere that you can find us right now. Just search for at the Culture Base. You can find us there, or on the World Wide Webs, you can find us at theculturebase.com. Lastly, before we dive into today's topic, our first ever think tank session is just around the corner. And we cannot wait to discuss culture with you and leaders from all around the country or globe. Who knows? We're probably worldwide at this point. I don't even know. We're excited to launch it to you. So all you have to do to be a part of that is totally free. It's going to be on July 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern. We're going to keep it to an hour max. It might even be shorter than that. But if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then you also want to go to theculturebase.com/think tank.
Mm.
Culturebase.com/think tank, or if you just go to culturebase.com and click on the think tank button, it's there for you as well. Fill out that form, let us know kind of where you're at, who you are, and what you're doing, and we will make sure that you get an invite link to the think tank. So I think that's all of the business out of the way. Today, we are going to be talking about 5 reasons that your culture is confusing. One of the things we talk about all the time in the culture base is that we need clarity, we need identity, and we need to amplify the people that we have and grow them in the right direction. And so we're going to focus on the clarity piece today when it comes to culture and why your culture is confusing. And so we're going to jump right in here with these 5 reasons. The first one being that it's unidentified. It's
Mm.
unidentified. If your culture is unidentified, it will be super unclear. I
Yeah.
know that's not super novel. If maybe you're listening to this first thing in the morning and you're just like, well, I needed something really dumbed down for me today
Yeah.
to start the day. I'm giving it to you
Yeah.
on a
Cat's
Gerber
meow.
spoon.
I
Yeah,
heard cat's
this is the
meow. That's good. That was helpful.
yeah. So, first reason that your culture is unclear or is confusing is that it's unidentified. Blake, talk to us
Yeah.
about that for a minute.
Yeah. So unidentified, undefined, like there are a lot of reasons to gain clarity on why you are the way you are, right? Like this is why we
Honestly.
do. There are reasons we do things like when we do personality tests, for example. We
Yeah.
do them and we're not like, "Oh my gosh, that's me." We're all like, "Oh, that makes sense. That's why I never thought about that." Those are good
We're
words to
intrigued.
help me understand me.
Yeah.
We don't do that for our company very well. A lot
No.
of or we do it and we just kind of like superimpose what we think. It's, we're excellence. We're really good.
We're
We are
excellent.
just so excellence based, and today we're going to do
Yeah.
some excellence. And the problem with that is when you're so undefined or you are weakly defined, um, problems are going to arise because your team will try to define what it is you're trying to do. Okay,
Mhm.
so if you have vision and you're like, here's where we're going to go, here are the things we're going to do, um, your team is trying to figure out who the players are in the game. They're trying to figure out where the direction is, and they're trying like everyone's trying to finish a story in their head. You know, like
Yeah.
when you're talking, we're always almost trying to anticipate how to finish the
Sentence.
Okay,
Sandwiches.
look at this. This is crazy. So our minds are constantly trying to get ahead of that so that we can respond and we can react and it's that's natural. But if you don't give any definition to it, if you don't help under your team understand the story, they're going
Mm.
to. And
Yeah,
so
they'll fill in the
this
gaps.
what's that?
They'll fill in the gaps. They'll fill in the
100%.
narrative.
100%. Just even like our I've heard this and I don't know it's true because I'm not a science guy. I like to think I am, but it's all fake. So as people are looking and you're like looking at a given frame, your brain is actually like trying to fill in the peripheral with what it thinks. Okay, what
Yeah.
it is assuming is there. Even with like green, it's fixing all those things as you pass it, which is super
Mm.
interesting. But I think this is what we try to do as a people too, is we're trying to fill in the gaps that don't make sense or don't have um, color to it. We're gonna fill
Yeah.
that in. And this reminds me, have you seen the show The Dropout?
I have not.
Oh man, it's so good. I have to watch it in little spurts because it's like intense. And
Okay.
I'm like, for clarity, I'm a like if I watch TV, I'm here to laugh. I'm here to relax. I'm not here to like, but every once in a while I get in one of those like I need to be like really in on this. And that
Yeah.
movie or that show is so good. So it's about this company Theranos. And this is true story. Elizabeth Holmes, she is founded this in 2003 and the whole idea was a Silicon Valley biotech startup and the whole idea was that she was going to like bring this revolutionary way of doing like blood testing. Okay, so it was this technology that they were inventing where it would just take a few drops of blood, but it promised to like do this entire medical diagnostic, and it was just like going to change the game. And so they had this idea of like what's it called, like almost having this focus on innovation and excellence and becoming like the next big thing. That was always the push, right? The problem is that that was not clearly defined. And so what
Mm.
ended up happening is, well, the tech didn't actually work. And so um, they started basically lying to investors, lying to shareholders, making it look like the thing worked. And it basically like the SEC's involved now. She's been fined. The business is gone, I believe. Like they completely imploded. But there were in the show, especially, and I don't know if this is real, but it's very real in nature.
No
Is
spoilers
that
here.
okay? But the people were starting to churn out, right? Like the people who were part of the innovation side of things started to fizzle out because it was when people said it's about excellence and that was a
Mm.
culture or value. It's about excellence and innovation. Ethical ways unethical ways were taken to come about with the responses. And the
Mhm.
problem is that that's never like you have to have some standard of ethics no matter where you're going and what you're doing if you're going to have these things associated. So, because it was so lightly defined, problems greatly arose. Um,
Mm.
so, having a lack of shared core values or just really unclear core values or cultural values is going to lead to problems for sure. Um, just not even like lacking clear expectations. Um, it's keeping people held back from feeling this sense of accomplishment as well. So
Yeah.
when it's undefined, what tends to happen is our our metrics or our KPIs or what we're trying to hit and accomplish doesn't get defined either. And so then we start to lack these clear expectations and then everyone like this is one of my biggest frustrations with not having deadlines is when people think, "Oh, if we just never had deadlines, this would be great." If we never had deadlines, nothing would ever get done
Nothing would
and
get done.
we would never feel accomplished. And so that's why having those clear expectations, even on your culture, is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Why we
How
stand.
do you know that you've won?
Yeah,
Right? How do
well
you know that
said.
you're achieving what it is that you're out to achieve? And
Mhm.
we often say too, we talked a minute ago about filling those gaps. Like we often say at the culture base that culture is defined by what you allow to happen.
Mm,
And because we were talking about that assumptive nature, right, where your brain is going to fill in all of the
mhm,
assumptions based on your previous history, based on your own life experiences, based on the way that you view the world, which is why personality profile tests are often so important for us as leaders, because we want to know how those that we lead view the world. All of that plays into your culture. And if you leave it undefined, which is the first reason that your culture is confusing, if you leave it undefined, people will fill in those gaps and you'll have a vast multitude. You just say the word excellence, right? And you have 10 people on your team. You have 10 different
mm,
versions of what excellence means. You have
mhm.
10 different standards of excellence. And so, unless you're defining what that means very clearly, you're going to miss the mark every time because you're going to be like, y'all, this isn't excellence. And you're like, well, it was excellence to one of the 10.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the other nine of us were just as confused as you are, sir.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's exactly why you have, um, and this usually like cultivates at leadership, right? And so the
Yeah.
leaders in your company, that's where it starts to cultivate or percolate, right? So you have this one person who is really like nailing it, and you're like, oh, that's my guy, that's my gal. They're always doing the thing I'm looking for, and but they just somehow got closer to your perspective of excellence.
Hmm.
And then another one, you're like, they're just not hitting it. Well, they are. It just
They're hitting
potentially
their own
isn't the way
version.
you want it. Yeah, exactly. So
Hmm.
it's one thing to have core values and culture values, it's another to
Yeah.
live them. And that's a lot harder. I
Yeah.
think as well with this, when you don't have defined clarity on this, conflict resolution becomes a challenge too. And you have
Phew.
no mechanism, and your communication platforms are also really hard to define because you haven't set up this standard of here's how we operate. Here's how we deal with the day to day. Here's how we when we come and have issues, because if you're like we just don't have issues, well, then you're not really running a company. You're going to have issues all the time. So
Hmm.
when that happens, what are the rules to the game? Like, what are the rules to the game? Because you've set up your culture and your core values so well that people know, hey, this is the way we operate. And inversely, this is the way we don't operate. So when something happens, to like not have this freak out moment of like I've heard people who say, you know, we're really laid back. We really listen to each other. Everyone's got a voice. Everyone's, we're listening to everyone's ideas. And then you have a moment where someone's like, "Hey, what if we do this?" And you hear that person go, "No, that'll never work because back in the '90s we tried that and it didn't work, and then here's what we do now." And you're like, "Whoa, chill the hell out! What's happening here?" Like that is what you said your culture was. You just clearly ran over that with a lawnmower, and that
That's
wasn't
how they sound to me too when they start getting into that. They
the
sound
no
exactly
monsters.
like that to me. Yeah. The
Oh
no monsters, they sound exactly like that. That'll never work. We did that once.
man.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, my bad. Sorry, I just
Yeah.
thought, this place encouraged ideas and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Thought we were about excellence.
yeah, exactly. And I think another thing that's pretty important here, especially with being in our ever changing society, and I promise we're getting off number one here. I think this is important, but in our ever changing society, the way your industry and your company look today is likely not the way it will look tomorrow.
Hmm.
And so, if that's true, if we can just agree on that for a second, then if we're not defining what we're about, we're going to be really resistant to change
Yep.
because you don't have something to redefine or um, evolutionize, if you will, because you don't have something to work from. You just have this blank slate that you've thrown a bunch of things on and you don't know what to do with it. When you've clearly given definition to something, it's so much easier to adjust. It's like Eisenhower, I believe, his whole like thing about planning. He says that all plans are pointless, but planning is indispensable. And the reason why is because plans, they're going to go to the wayside. You're not going to hit it the right way,
Hmm.
but you have something that already is 80 to 90% that you can adjust from. Same thing with our culture. When it's not defined clearly, we don't know how to work with it as we go through change. And
Yep.
cultures like that just tend to be incredibly resistant to change.
Yeah. Let's move on to number 2, because I think what people are going to hear in number 1 is, all right, we need to flesh out everything. We need to have full on Word documents filled with pages about all the things that's really going to expound on what excellence means, to this company. Here's the problem with that is the second reason that your culture is unclear, is that it's not memorable.
Mm,
Or sorry, 5 reasons that your culture is confusing is that it's not memorable.
yeah.
A lot of us will kind of go to the extreme, right? And we'll come up with 18 values
Yeah.
that have 16 sub points
Yeah.
and 40 points of action per sub point, and we're like, I don't know how much more clear I can be. The problem is is that it's not memorable, right? One of my favorite quotes, and I use this often when I'm trying to get leaders to kind of refine and edit and bring it on in, is Kevin Malone from The Office when he says, "Why use many word when few word do trick?" Right? Like, that's what you remember. I even remember that phrase because there's a lot less words in it than if he tried to expound on it, right? So if you can, one of the things I've been using recently is index cards.
Mm,
I have a friend of mine, Will, who has stacks of index cards. He always has an index cards on him at all times. If
mm.
you're around him and you ask him for an index card, he'll be like, "Here you go." What I love is if you can't explain what you're trying to communicate,
Mm.
anything, pick your values, pick your mission, pick a one-on-one with your with a someone that you're leading. It doesn't matter if you can't fully explain it on an index card. It's too confusing.
Yeah.
It's too confusing. Now, of course, you can try to write as small as possible, and that's a method. But eventually, you're going to run out of space. So,
Mhm.
if you can't define it on an index card, it's too confusing. It's too much to remember. And I'm not saying one index card per value. And you're like, oh yeah, one per value, got front and back. I got plenty of room to fit all those 40 sub points. I'm talking about your whole culture value
Yeah.
system. If you can't explain it on one index card,
Yeah.
it is too confusing and it's not memorable. It's not memorable. People remember short, simple phrases, not long uh expositions on
Mhm.
the theory of why excellence should matter in the universe.
Yeah. That's good. I think as well with those types of things, like even they say this in goal setting, but I think it's true in setting your core values and cultural standards is using action verbs to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like even in like, hey, my goal is uh, to be smarter. Well, that's a to be verb, and how do you define that? And how are you going to like? I personally, with my team at Ridgeline, we love using the verbiage of like if I can't say this in a sentence, it's not good enough. Like if I
Mm,
can't use this in common vernacular, throw it out. Because when do you need to know them? Well, it's usually in times of tension, right? Like it's usually in times of conflict or I need to do something to accomplish something and my head needs to be about the way I'm about to do this.
yeah.
Ooh, we could really make a lot of money here if I just didn't convey this.
Mhm.
Yeah, but or hey, we need to deal with this problem. Like so and so's doing this, but and I've heard this in my teams. Like they'll be like, you know what? Well, we build trust through candor, so I'm gonna have to just say it. And
Yeah.
when you can just keep it like that to where it's memorable, if it's not memorable, it's not usable. And I think that's
Mm,
the thing is if
that's it.
this is not memorable, it won't be used. And the whole
Yep.
point of having values is that they're used. It's not
Right.
and we don't always operate 100% in our core values.
Right. You don't
So
get a tax write off just for having core values on your wall.
exactly, exactly. Yep, they're not giving those out yet. So,
No.
but if that's true and we've got to make it usable, um, then we gotta give it life, right? Like
Yeah.
nothing if you don't make it alive, nobody will make it alive. So
Yeah.
you have to give it something. I kind of think of it, it's like you're trying to screw in a screw with your fingers, but you have a screwdriver in your pocket. Like
Mm.
that's what happens when you have core values that aren't memorable. Okay. Is that
Yep.
you have the thing, but nobody's using it.
Nobody's using it. Yep. Well, which brings us to our third reason why your culture is confusing is it's not branded.
Mm,
And part of making it memorable is understanding that we live in a visual society. Now, what we mean when we say branding, all big picture, your branding in general is nothing but your reputation. It's what do people think about when they hear your name, your company's name. So in this case, what do people think about when they hear your value? What do they think about when we're just going to pick on the excellence value? What do they think about visually when they think about the word
yeah.
excellence? And so it sounds super silly to have like little cartoons and icons and things associated
Mhm.
with it, but I'm telling you, if you want your culture values to stick, if you want them to be memorable, if you want them to be clear and not confusing, you need to brand them icons and branding and things like that. That makes it stick. And when it's sticky, it carries, it goes with
Mhm.
you, right? If someone slaps the kick me sign on the back of your back because it's on a sticky note, it goes with you. And so if it's sticky, it carries.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that we need to remember. It sounds super silly. And maybe for you, you're like, I'm just a numbers guy. I don't need the little icons and cartoons. That's great for you. You're in the minority.
Yep.
Just say that right now,
Yeah.
because most people are visual, not just visual learners,
Mhm.
but they're visual carriers.
Yeah.
And so, if you want people to be carriers of your culture value, you need to give them something to carry, put something in their hands. And so, if like one of the companies I used to work for, one of our culture values was to set the tone. Everything we did
Mm,
set the tone. It set the temperature. It dialed the knob, right? So our little icon that we had for it was a little knob. And sometimes in a meeting, we could look at each other from across the room and just do this right here.
mm.
And we knew we're like, you're setting the tone right now,
Yeah, that's
right?
good.
And so those are the things that stick with you every step of the way. If it's not branded, it's not clear, it's confusing.
Yeah, that's good. I think branding, like if I simplify branding, it is legitimately just recognizing identity, right? It is
Mhm.
recognizing the identity of what it is, which means if you try to go about the way of like trying to recognize yourself as something you aren't, it's going to get called out really quick. People are really good at picking up on bullshit and have really good cognitive dissonance meters where they can go, you know what? This doesn't look like this. Like when
Mhm.
I walk downstairs in the morning and I slip on stupid little boy underwear with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on them. I pick them up and I don't go, I bet these are my daughters and I'm going to have words with her. No, I pick them up and I'm like, well, these are either my sons or mine. And I know that because that's the identity phase. I'm recognizing identity of what this thing is. And I think we don't think about that because it just should be natural. I think
Mm.
everyone needs to get that phrase out of their heads.
Yeah,
Okay? Isn't it just assumed? No, it's never just assumed. Nothing in your culture should ever just be assumed. If you don't
preach.
say it and you don't play towards it, it's not real. If you
That's right.
just think, well, everybody should just do it this way, that's not true. And the truth is, you probably haven't always done it that way. You just don't
Yep.
remember what it was like to not have that in your life. Okay? So part of this branding is continually redefining because you have people coming into your organization, you have people coming around your organization that don't know you. And it's your
Mhm.
job to help them get to know you better, quicker with branding, sure. Social's great for that reason, is we can give these um just good feels of who we are, things we care about.
Mhm.
This is huge. This is huge. If we're trying to build great teams, you're going to attract the right teams. And even more importantly, you're going to keep people out who don't want that type of thing in their mouth anyway. They're like, "Oh, this tastes nasty." Good. You don't want
Good
them.
win.
You
This
that's
is not
like,
the place for you.
whew, that's perfect. Get out.
Yeah.
Your life's going to be better. Our life's going to be better, but it's going
Yep.
to help you attract the right talent, and your team's going to be engaged more when they are around people that think like them and do things like them. And I'm not saying personality. I think it's really important to say that I think total different personalities make a organization and culture great,
Yep. Vital.
but like very similar values, that's where it's at, and very
Yeah.
similar how we operate in an environment, that's important. And when they are engaged, when team members are engaged, they stay longer. And the work you get out of it goes next level, right? And I
Yeah.
mean the work that they get to perform goes next level for them too. So, and then the last thought I have here with the branding aspect is that it just is building trust with your external customers too. And
Hmm.
it builds trust because they're getting to talk to you on a day to day. The people you've hired fit this, right? That your team members fit this. And so when they talk to them, they go, everything I see in your branding and the way you do things, it lines up. You guys are just this way. And I love it. And because when I don't have cognitive dissonance, what's the opposite is trust. And so you build trust in this time. And so creates a good impression that extends way beyond your product or service.
Yeah. Yeah, and Blake hit on one there in the middle where he was talking about branding. He talked about making it attractive, which is our fourth reason
Mm,
that your culture is confusing.
yeah.
Is it because it's not attractive?
Yeah.
Well, let's face it. If you were in the marketplace right now and you were looking for a new company to work for, would you want to work for the company that you lead? Think about that for a second. And I think if you're honest and you don't hesitate, you've identified your problem is that your culture uh, is not very attractive at all.
Mhm.
And if you want to attract the people that you want to attract and you want to have the right people on the bus and you want to be able to have everything move forward in the right direction with unity and clarity, your culture has to be attractive. It has to be
Mhm.
a place that people want to stick around at. We live in a day and age now where people can kind of go and do anything. They can leave your company for another company. They can leave your company for themselves
Yeah.
and go do their own thing. And they're like, you know what? I've been looking for 20 years for a place that fits my culture values. Personally, nothing is out there, so I'm going to go. And now you've lost someone who's really good because they're good enough to go start their own thing,
That's
and they're
right.
probably going to end up competing with you and crushing you in the process. And so, if your culture is not attractive, then it's not clear. If it's unattractive, it's muddy,
Mm,
right? No one looks at a
yeah.
pile of mud and says, I cannot wait to go swimming in that hole,
Mhm.
right? But if they look at a clear, nice, crisp in-ground pool on a beautiful
Mm,
day and they go, I can't wait to jump in that because it's clear,
yeah.
right? It's attractive to me right now. And that is a major point in making sure that your culture is not confusing.
Yeah. And we miss out a lot of times, not because we don't have an attractive culture, but because we don't know how to position our culture in attractive
Mm,
light to like actually
yep.
hit the heart of the people who are who would fit perfectly. Like it is about like if we talk about this story, life is a story and hitting the hearts of people, not just your customers, but your team members, your internal customers, and hitting their hearts in the right light. When you're able to do that and find the right fits, man, it is you're going to see that retention. You're going to see lower turnover. And honestly, like less effort on the hiring aspect on the front side. Like I think about this, I don't remember what book this was in. Honestly, if anyone listening to this remembers this, please shout out because I'm constantly looking for where this one's at. But there's this story of this garbage company, right? And I want to say it was either in Ireland or England or something. And this company was having a hard time staffing. Like everyone is like, yeah, I get it, but it's a garbage company too. Like, could you imagine trying to hire for a garbage company in an industry that is or in a world that is already struggling with labor? Like that is taking a ton of aspects that are just real challenging. And so this garbage company, what they learned was that I think it was either like gym buffs or boxers. They started to target them, and they started to create story around how nice would it be to be able to get up early, go put in your shift, and get a workout while you're at your shift, and to build all those muscles you don't want to see atrophy at an office job. And so they like just started marketing in this way and had huge success because they had a culture, even at a trash company. I believe you can have a great culture at a trash company. Um,
Hmm.
and so even at that place, they said, we're just having a hard time presenting how great of a culture it is and how great of a place this is. Let's position it differently. And so that's what they did and had just fantastic success.
That's incredible. I
Yeah.
love that story. I love that. Just take the most like unattractive market and make it attractive because
Yep.
uh because you care, right? Man,
Yep.
it's incredible. The fifth and final reason that your culture is confusing, and this is the biggest one, and this is the one that I hope
Mm,
leads you and spurs you on to the most action today after listening to this, is that it's not your culture is not used to measure success and failure.
yeah.
And we'll often say hire and fire on your culture values, because if you're going to hold people to the standard, then you have to hold people to the standard. Again, it can't just be pretty wallpaper on your office hallway
Yeah.
with these values and these icons and simple and memorable. You can take care of 1 through 4 here, and if you miss 5, it doesn't matter. If you don't hire and fire based on the values, no one will care about the values. And it's not about a fear factor here. It's about celebrating what you want repeated. We do this all the time in
Yeah.
life. You do that with yourself, right? So you use every opportunity to integrate the value that was lived out in each success, and how it wasn't lived out in every failure. Every success and failure in your company is an opportunity for you to further lean in to your culture values. It worked because excellence matters. And here's how excellence played out here. It failed because we went for the dollar instead of the excellence.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Simple. If we're just going to stick with that same example throughout the episode, that is the stuff that will take it to the next level and make it a living, breathing thing that people actually care about, and it will give massive amounts of clarity, because the 10 people that we talked about earlier, and there's 10 different variations of excellence. As you begin to celebrate what excellence looks like, and as you begin to discipline on what excellence doesn't look like,
Yeah.
people will really quickly learn, oh, that's what you mean. Right? Because you can have all these things, right? You can have the icons, you can make it memorable, you can make it attractive, you can have it defined really well, but if it's not integrated into your day to day, it will not matter, and people will just go, "Oh, that's nice." But anyway, back to work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I don't remember who said this. You'd probably know better than I would. Um, but there's this quote that says, "Preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words." And
Mm,
I sure there's a lot of theological stuff to dig in on that, which I don't care to at right now. But the idea behind it, I think, is really important here. It's important to be able to articulate and have clear core values. But
yeah,
just like in parenting, like even though I think it's very wise to come up with like, what are our core values as a family? What are the cultural values we're going to set as standards? It's great to come up with those, but even in parenting, we celebrate and discipline. Celebrating, disciplining, it is the act of articulating what's important.
yep,
It shows, right? Like when we don't celebrate or discipline and we're just indifferent to things, that lack of voice or celebration or discipline shows that that thing actually is not important.
yep.
So if you
It
have a core value,
screams.
what's that?
It screams that
It
it's not
does.
important.
And if you have cultural core values that you say are important, but then never celebrate and discipline by them, then it's BS. It's not
Yep.
true. And often it's because we don't engage in becoming good at it. And that's it. This is really just about taking intention and saying,
Yeah.
how do I celebrate by this core value? If there's no way to celebrate by it or discipline by it, it probably shouldn't be your core value. Okay.
Mm,
Other ways, like almost reverse engineer this. How have you been celebrating and how have you been disciplining? Like, think
mm.
about that in the past month. What are the things you celebrated? What are the things you disciplined? Chances are those are connected to a core value. And one that if it's not up on your wall, probably needs to be.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point about values that may be there and live and breathe within your company, but you haven't ever captured that organism and said, "This is our value, right? This is a natural thing." that we believe in. So, so good. I mean, we could spend multiple hours talking about this, and I'm sure on future episodes we'll break down some of these even further. But we do want to leave you with kind of a practical step. If you're like me, you're a practical leader. You're like, okay, this is all great. What do I need to do next? And so I just want to tell you a couple things that I think you need to do next. Number one, I think you need to take one of your values, if you have them. If you don't, start there. But if
Mm,
you have values, take one of them and just define it, distill it down to its simplest format, and paint done for your team. Help
mm,
them understand what that value looks like played out in your company on a day to day basis, and talk about it. Number two, you need to talk about it until you're sick of it. And then
mm.
once you're sick of it,
Yeah.
keep talking about it, because once you're sick of it is the point that they're just starting to hear it. And
Yeah.
I know that's frustrating, but we know this is true in all aspects of our lives. Blake talked about in parenting. You know, we remind our kids all the time, say thank you, say thank you, say thank you, say thank you. And we're like, I'm just a robot reminding my kid to say thank you. And then one day we're out in public and they say thank you and they're like, they listened.
My
Right?
baby, my baby
When they
did
did
it.
it. Three, take that same value and give it an icon. You don't have to be an artist. You can find something on clip art if you need to. Just give it something visual for people to remember it by.
Mm,
Number four, make sure it's attractive. If it's not something that makes you want to work at your own company, then it's not attractive to
yeah.
anybody else. Make sure it's attractive. And the fifth one, use it.
Mm,
Measure success and failure by this. Use it, use it, use it. In every conversation that you have, in every meeting that you have, talk about it, use it, level it up, measure it up, and it will become more and more clear very quickly. You'll see that how quickly culture sometimes can feel like this big Titanic that we're having to shift, right? And it can take a while for culture to shift, but nothing can make it faster than you using your culture values.
mhm.
So use it. I think that's it, man. I think we made it through the 5 reasons your culture isn't clear. Anything else you want to add, Blake, before we wrap up?
Nope, I think that's spot on.
Love it. So we are going to wrap up this episode. And next episode, we're going to talk about who you hire is who you become.
Bum, bum,
And
bum.
bum, bum, bum. And we're going to get all up into that identity part of clarify, identify, and amplify. And we're going to figure out who you are becoming as a company. And more than likely, it's because of who you're hiring. And so we're going to talk all about that. We cannot wait to be with you. A reminder of our think tank session on July 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Go to culturebase.com/think tank to be a part of that. Till then, we'll talk to you next time on the Culture Base podcast.